This is something that happened when I was fresh out of college working my first real job. I had several college internships, but this job was one that I had really wanted. I had to move to a completely new state and city, and the interview for the job was intense. But it was a career that I had wanted, and I felt prepared, even though the jobs are pretty competitive. I was not the only person to be hired at this particular company. They hired 5 of us new employees for the department. Most of us were fresh from college. We would have to work our way up the ranks, and I knew that it might get a bit competitive. My goal was to just control what I could control and always work very hard. The company helps new employees get places to live, because it was common for employees to have to move around a lot. So after getting hired, I agreed to move into this new apartment and become roommates with a coworker. It was kind of weird because we were both just hired and in some ways competing with each other for promotions in the future. The guy that I lived with was named Derek. He seemed pretty normal at first. He kind of gave me the impression that he was a little greedy and selfish though, but other than that he seemed like a pretty normal guy for the most part. We started our new job at the same time and we were kept pretty busy. By the time we would leave work, it would be nighttime. I would pretty much just go back to my room and then go to sleep. Our apartment was fairly nice. It was really new and it had a living room and kitchen in the middle. Then on one side was my bedroom and bathroom and on the other side was Derek's, so we each had our own room and stuff. We didn't really interact with each other much if at all around the apartment. We didn't carpool to work or anything either. One time we did though, and he drove, and then he Venmo requested me $5 for gas, even though it was like a 5-minute drive. So I decided not to do that again. After living with Derek for like 2 months and working with him, I didn't like him at all. At work, I didn't interact with him a ton, but being in our group, I'd hear him say stuff. He wasn't a very likable guy. So nothing really crazy happened until like a month into the job. We had both been doing an overall pretty good job at work despite not getting along very well. I was proud of my performance to that point. I would get there early, leave late, and even do work at home sometimes. We had our folders with files and notebooks, as well as stuff on our work laptops. One morning though, I remember that I woke up and almost missed work. My phone was dead, and thankfully I somehow naturally woke up only like 15 minutes later than usual. I was so confused though, because I was sure that I had plugged my phone into charge when I went to bed. I mean, I did that every single night. However, I figured that I must have somehow forgot. I scrambled to get to work and was still on time. Several days later though, I was even closer to being late. I remember that I woke up to my alarm that was going off, except it was right at the time that I would normally leave, so I had no time to get ready at all. I went as quick as I could and was just able to make it. It was such a rush that it wasn't until later that I thought about how that could possibly happen. I would plug in my phone and set my alarm for the same time every morning, so why on earth would it not go off until like an hour later? Or how could I have possibly slept through it for that long? I'm not a deep sleeper. That's when I had the idea that maybe Derek messed with my phone. Maybe he was trying to get me fired or something. The phone couldn't just have the alarm go off so late on its own. That made no sense. So that night when we were both home from work, I told Derek about what happened. I didn't accuse him, but I was just saying how it didn't make any sense. His response really ticked me off. He said, "I don't know man, that's your problem. Learn how to wake up on time or maybe you shouldn't be working here." So a few days went by without anything strange happening. Then, one morning when I woke up, all my files were out of my folder and on the floor. They had been organized and now they were all out of order, which was pretty important. So I had to reorganize them before work, which almost made me late again. I knew at that point that Derek was messing with me. Even though on a slim chance maybe the folder had just fallen off the desk because it had been on the edge of it. But things wouldn't get messed up that much. So that day after work I accused Derek. I told him to stop messing with me. He said that I was just a disorganized slob and I was crazy for accusing him. I thought about what I could do. I couldn't report Derek to work or anything because I didn't have sure proof, and I knew that Derek would probably make something up about me if I did. So instead I tried to take measures to prevent Derek from messing with me. I couldn't do anything drastic like stay up all night to try to catch him. I needed to get to bed at a decent time to be up early and get rest. I also couldn't install a lock on my bedroom door because our apartment prohibited it, and for some reason the bedroom doors didn't have locks on them, which makes no sense. Just the bathrooms had locks. So I decided to sleep with my phone under my pillow. That way, if Derek tried to grab it, I would wake up. I also kept my files hidden in my room. One night, I did stay up like an hour later than usual pretending to sleep, hoping to catch Derek, but nothing happened that night. For like a week, things were good. Then, one night, Derek really did it. I woke up to find that my work laptop had been unplugged and was dead. Also, my work clothes, which were a suit and tie, were all wrinkled. It was like somebody had deliberately messed them up. I was so mad that I wanted to punch Derek in the face. I went out into the kitchen area and started yelling at him. He denied everything and then just walked away back to his room and said that he didn't care. I threatened to report him and he said that nobody would believe me. He told me I was delusional. Good thing for me, I had other clothes I could wear and I could charge my laptop just enough before leaving. So I went back to my room and got ready for work. But it was like Derek was trying to sabotage me into getting fired or quitting or something. Or else he just hated me for some reason. I wanted to move out of the apartment badly, but we had a lease, and I couldn't prove that he had done anything wrong really. I wasn't quite sure what to do. I started hiding everything. I was keeping my phone, laptop, and work clothes as well as files hidden. I was putting other things in places where it would be really loud to move them. One night, I actually sort of caught Derek. I woke up to a sound in my room. When I opened my eyes, it was very dark, but I saw movement. I quickly turned on the lamp next to my bed and saw Derek sprinting out of the room. I yelled at him, but he was back in his room within seconds. I got up and followed him out, but he had like a 10-second head start on me. When I got to his room, he was in bed pretending to sleep. I called him out for being in my room, and he pretended that I had just woken him up and got all mad at me. He claimed I was crazy, so I went back to my bedroom at that point. I still didn't have any proof of anything. Over the next few days, nothing else crazy happened. Maybe after that close call for Derek, he decided to take a break from messing with me. But then, something unexpected happened. During the workday, I heard that Derek had been fired. I hadn't seen him in a few hours, and another coworker said that he had been harassing a female coworker. He had violated the rules and was let go. So the rest of the workday after that was several more hours. When I got back home that night, Derek was gone. However, the entire apartment had been trashed. My stuff and the furniture that came with the apartment was all messed up and all over the floor. He smashed the TV, broke several lamps, and tables were tipped over. And my bedroom was the worst. He really took his time with that. I took pictures of all the damage and reported it to the apartment. I was told that Derek would be prosecuted by the apartment as well. After that, I never saw him again. He was definitely the worst coworker as well as roommate that I ever had. When I was in college, I got matched with a random roommate my first year. I was new to the university and it was a pretty large school. My roommate was this guy named Matthew. Instantly, he seemed a little strange. Really, he just seemed unfriendly. He did not seem shy or awkward at all. It was like he just didn't want to talk to me. And that was apparent pretty much right away, so I kinda just did my own thing. We did not have any classes together or anything, so we'd just be gone during the day and come back later. Then we would do homework or whatever on our separate sides of the room and nobody would say anything. I got used to it after a few days and it was fine with me for the most part. Overall, besides the communication, he was a good roommate. Both of our sides of the room were clean and he wasn't loud or crazy or anything. And on most weekends, he would go home. So I would have the entire room to myself, which was nice. So about 2 months or so into the school year, something really weird happened one night. I got back to the dorm at like 8 p.m. I had been in the dining hall and then hung out with some friends in a lounge area and did some homework. When I got back, Matthew appeared to be gone. I didn't see him in the room. A few hours went by and he still wasn't there. By now, it was getting to be time to go to bed. I still didn't really think much of it though. I was just hanging out, sitting at my desk in the corner and playing video games with my headset on. At about 11 o'clock, I got tired and then was going to go to bed. However, that's when I was looking around the room and I noticed something. I saw movement under Matthew's bed, and then I realized Matthew was there. He was hiding under his bed. He had a mini fridge under there as well as a large storage box, so it was hard to see, but he was behind them. I was so confused. He had been there for hours now, and I hadn't heard a peep or seen him. It also seemed like he was looking at me. I called him out, asking what he was doing hiding under the bed. He came out and then played it off as a game. He said that he just wanted to see if I would notice him, and he gave a kind of nervous laugh. I said, yeah, but for 3 hours? He then said that he was going to bed and left the room to brush his teeth. I was weirded out by the whole thing, but what could I do? For a few weeks, nothing else strange happened that I was aware of. It was pretty much the normal routine, and we still didn't talk much or anything. But then, one night, I remember that we both went to bed at around the same time. All the lights went out and I fell asleep pretty quickly. The next thing I knew, I was waking up randomly in the night. I didn't know why I had woken up. All the lights were still off and I didn't hear anything. But then, I got the sense that I was being watched and my eyes slowly started to adjust to the dark. I turned over in bed to get more comfortable, and that's when I saw Matthew standing there. He was holding something in his hands. It looked like a hammer, and he was sort of holding it up, almost as if he was going to hit me or something. He was standing just a couple of feet from my bed. I jumped back in bed when I saw him as a reaction. He moved away back towards his bed at that point. Then I asked him what on earth he was doing. He said that he was just fixing his bed. I was just like, what? He said that there was a loose nail in his bed, and he was trying to fix it quietly but didn't want to wake me up. I didn't believe it for a second. He then said that he thought he might have woken me up, so he went over to see. I just said okay and tried to act normal, because this guy had a weapon in his hands and I didn't want to make him angry. He said sorry and then put the hammer down and went in his bed. I couldn't fall asleep after that for the longest time. I mean, if on the slightest of chances what he was saying was true, then why would he be hammering in the pitch dark? The next morning I went and requested to move out and get my own dorm room. Those things take time though, so I would have to continue living with Matthew. I should have reported him, but I didn't want to at the time. I didn't know what his deal was, but I just wanted to stay away from him. For the next few nights, things were fine. Then, much sooner than I expected, I was granted a new room. So one day, when Matthew was gone, I just moved all my stuff and left. I never saw him again. My name is Amelia, and I have a very scary experience that I would like to share. So, it all started about 3 years ago when I moved into a new apartment. I needed a roommate to be able to afford the rent, so I found this girl on Craigslist to live with me named Sarah. She was the same age as me and seemed pretty nice at first. Our apartment was not in the best part of town, and the apartment wasn't that great either. We had a 12-month lease, and about a month in, I was fortunate enough to get a much better job. So I was making more decent money now, and I could not wait for the lease to be up so that I could get my own place. I would also be able to get a place that was a little bit nicer. Now, Sarah was overall a decent roommate. She worked at a gas station in town, but some of her friends seemed kinda sketchy. They would come over here and there. Sarah and I really didn't become friends, but we were friendly enough with each other for the most part. So, I remember that at one point Sarah got fired from her job. I would just see her around the apartment all the time, and when I asked her, she said that she had gotten fired like a month ago. I told her sorry and I hoped that she could find another job and stuff. Now, a while after this, one night I was home by myself because Sarah was gone. It wasn't that unusual, and I didn't really know or care where she was. But when it was getting late, I got a text message from her asking if I could give her a ride. I asked her where she was. Then she called me. When I answered, she appeared to be crying and said that I needed to come and get her now. I asked her what was going on, and she said that she didn't know where she was and she was stranded. Then she said that she would send me her location. So she sent it to me from her phone. When I looked, it appeared as though she was in a park by a lake. I said that I would come and get her and asked her why she was there and what happened. Between sobs, she said that she was going to her new job and her car broke down, but she got out to walk. Then she said that she got lost. That's all she gave me. I hadn't known that she had gotten a new job, and clearly she was very emotional. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I figured that I should try to help her out. So I got in my car and began driving to the location. It wasn't that far away, only like 5 minutes. I had never been to that park before though. It was off a quiet road, and when I entered and got into the parking lot, it was completely empty and very dark. There was just a couple of dim streetlights in the far corners of the parking lot. Past the parking lot there were a few trails, but I couldn't really see anything. Most of them went into the woods. I called Sarah and asked her where exactly in the park she was. She told me that she went down the path kind of far and got lost. I was starting to get annoyed. I was looking at her location on the phone, and I didn't know if it was 100% pinpoint accurate, but it looked like she was a little bit farther in. So I started walking down the path, and it was honestly pretty creepy. I was pretty sure that the park was now closed, and I didn't even know if I was allowed to be there. So I kept walking and hoped that I would hear or see Sarah. I called out to her a few times, but heard nothing. I was following the location and trying to figure out where on the paths I should go. I kept going. Then I suddenly heard a noise not that far away. I stopped and called for Sarah. No one answered me. I didn't know if maybe it was an animal or another person. I looked to the spot. Things were silent for a few moments. Then, out of nowhere, I saw this man emerge from the woods and start walking towards me. I heard footsteps down another path nearby that connected, and looked over to suddenly see another man. I had no idea who they were, but they both looked sketchy and walking right towards me. I had a bad feeling about it and turned around. The men both sped up, and that caused me to take off running. I'm pretty fast, but they seemed to be gaining on me as I ran, at least one of them was. I didn't know why they were even chasing me or who they even were. I felt like I was running for my life though. It was an extremely scary feeling. Still, one of the men was able to catch up with me. I felt him grabbing me and he tried to tackle me to the ground. I had almost made it to the parking lot at that point, but not quite. He sort of succeeded because I fell, but he also fell and lost grip of me. My feet were towards his head, so while I was on the ground, I kicked at him and got him in the face pretty good. Meanwhile, the other guy who was much slower was now reaching us. I got to my feet and took off running again. Both men then started to chase after me. I ran even faster now than before if that was possible. Both men were soon gaining on me though and about 10 feet back. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't think that I would be able to make it to my car and get inside without them catching me, so I ran through the parking lot and then kept running past my car. The men were still gaining on me and getting closer. I kept running all the way out to the road. Then I got lucky. I saw headlights of a car approaching, and this road was usually very quiet at this time of night. I didn't care and I just started sprinting towards the headlights. I was right in the middle of the road, and the car started to stop and honk at me. But also, the men behind me now stopped chasing me because of it. They were a ways back and kind of at the entrance of the parking lot. I started yelling loudly for them to call the police. The person in the car seemed confused, but now that the men were backing away, I took out my own phone and dialed the police. I stayed in the street and told them what was going on. I didn't see the men anymore, but was afraid to go to my car again in case the men were hiding in the bushes or something. So I stayed in the street, and the person who was driving the car rolled down their window just a crack. It was a woman who asked what was going on. I told her that I was being chased by men, and I was on the phone with the cops. The lady then asked if I was okay, and saw that I had scraped my leg. I noticed that it was bleeding from when the men had tackled me on the path. I hadn't even noticed to that point. I was feeling a little more brave after talking to the woman. I told her where my car was and said that I was going to try to go to it. Then I ran for my car and thankfully was able to make it. I didn't see the men at all, but I knew they were probably close by. After getting inside my car, I locked the doors and wasted no time and drove out of there. I came back minutes later though to talk to the police when they arrived at the park. The officers also went in and found my roommate Sarah, who was in the park still. Then they located the two men. It turns out it was all a setup. Sarah was not lost and she was not even hysterical. She was friends with the two guys and she lured me out there so the three of them could rob me. She knew that I was making a lot more money than her, and the two guys I guess were friends with her from buying and selling drugs. The men as well as Sarah all had illegal drugs on them, which they ended up getting charged for. The attempted robbery charges ended up being dropped, which made me mad, but I have not seen Sarah since, and she got evicted as well. I just hope that I never see her or her friends again. Something really crazy happened when I was in college. So, during my freshman year, I got paired with another girl to live with in the dorms. We were supposed to be roommates and share what was a pretty standard dorm room. I met her on move-in day and she seemed alright. Her name was Sydney, and overall I didn't know much about her. We only briefly talked that first day, and she seemed to be gone a lot for the next few days. I had some classes and other stuff, but even when I was back at the dorm, I didn't see her much. Finally, when she got back from her classes on like the second or third day, I talked with her for like 10 or 20 minutes to get to know her. She seemed fairly uninterested, but overall was not rude or anything. For the next couple of weeks, she would be gone like all the time. She would pretty much just get back really late and then go to sleep. Most of the times, she would get back after I was already asleep. I would only know she was back because I would either wake up from her getting back, or I would get up the next morning and she would still be sleeping. Then one day, I came back from my classes, and all Sydney's stuff was just gone. It was like she had completely moved out. I figured that she had dropped out of the school or something. She hadn't said anything to me at all. Maybe she had gotten another room perhaps. I didn't know anything about it, but we had exchanged numbers when we first met, so I texted her asking what had happened. However, she never responded. I was kind of happy about this, because she was gone all the time anyways. Now I had the whole room to myself, and I had made some other friends there as well. Over the next few days, I rearranged the room, because now I had twice as much space as before. It was great, and I really enjoyed it. For the rest of the semester, I had the entire room to myself, and into the second semester as well. I even got a little more furniture now that I had my own place. So now, fast forward to almost the end of the school year. It was like April, and I was woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of my door opening. I was really creeped out. I was sure that I had locked the door. It was completely dark, so I didn't know who it could be. I looked over and saw a figure entering my room, but couldn't make out who it was. I was terrified. Then the lights turned on, and I saw Sydney standing there. It was the biggest surprise ever. She said, "What the F did you do to the room?" I said, "Where were you the last 6 months?" Sydney had a backpack and several bags with her. She said that she was at her boyfriend's in a tone as if I was stupid for not knowing that. Duh, I guess. I didn't know that she even had a boyfriend or anything, and she never responded to my text when I asked her what happened. I told her that I didn't know that and how I had texted her, but she said that she must have not got it. She started unpacking her things right there, and then I had to move all my stuff back to my side of the room. I was so mad. Even though it was late in the school year, I requested a new room the next day and was able to get one pretty shortly after. Sydney, as it turns out, had never dropped out of the school, and she still had a key to the room. She had moved in with her boyfriend and had lived with him the entire time. I guess they broke up, and she just moved right back in the middle of the night, mind you. Well, I found out later that she failed like 8 classes and ended up dropping out anyways. It was really scary though when she just entered my room out of nowhere in the middle of the night. When I was in college during my junior year, I lived in a house with another guy. His name was Sam, and we had met the year prior in a class project. I had a good amount of friends in college, but I wasn't able to find a good living situation, because for a while I didn't know if I was going to be transferring schools or staying. I ended up staying, which I was happy about, but I was kind of late to find a place for the following year. It was pretty much a situation where I would have to live in the dorms again. But then the guy I had a class with kind of randomly asked me if I knew where I was living, and I said no. So he told me that he needed a roommate for a house that he was living in. I pretty much said yes right away. I felt like I had gotten lucky at the situation, and I didn't know Sam very well other than the class that we had together. We had never hung out or anything, but I figured that it would be fine. So the house was pretty small and old, but other than that it was better than the dorms. It had an upstairs with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Then downstairs was another bathroom, a kitchen, living room, and a dining room. After moving in, things started out fine. I didn't really do much with Sam, we mostly kept to ourselves, but I didn't have a problem with him at all, and he was cool. However, several months into living there, some strange things started happening. One night, I remembered that I heard a door keep opening and closing downstairs. It was really weird. It was like it kept opening and then closing right away, non-stop. It creeped me out, so I got out of bed and went to look. By the time I got downstairs though, nobody was there. It was so weird. I went back upstairs and Sam's door was closed, so I assumed he was asleep. I didn't know how to explain the noise, but I was able to go back to bed a while later. Now, like a week or so after that, I remember that I was woken up to the sound of somebody knocking on my bedroom door. I thought that it had to be Sam, obviously. After waking up, I asked what he wanted, but he didn't answer me. I got up and went over to the door and opened it, but nobody was there. It was really strange. Then, later on, one time when I was doing homework late at night, I heard footsteps downstairs. I assumed that it was Sam, but then he texted me asking if I was downstairs. When I said no, he said that he heard someone down there. I did as well, and it really creeped me out. So I remember that we both went downstairs and looked all around, but didn't find anyone. It was really strange, and we even considered calling the police, but decided not to. So some really weird things had been happening around the house. I talked with Sam for a while about it, and he claimed that he had heard some strange things too. Then things got even worse. One night I heard a loud banging on my bedroom door. It was like somebody was trying to break the door down. I didn't want to open it, but it wasn't locked or anything. After it stopped, things went quiet for a while. Then I finally went over and looked. When I opened the door, nobody was there. It was very strange how all these weird things were happening. I didn't even want to live in the house anymore. Then, one night shortly after that, I got added on Snapchat by a guy from our school. I knew him because he was friends with Sam, but I wasn't really friends with him. After adding him back, he texted me and asked me if strange things were happening in our house, and I said yes. The guy then told me that it was all Sam. He said that Sam had told him how he pretends to make the house all scary. He said he did that because he thought it was funny and he didn't like me, and he also hoped that I would get scared and move out. Apparently, this guy had had a falling out with Sam for some reason, and they were not friends anymore. So now this guy wanted me to know the truth. He also said that he had even helped Sam once. I think it was the time when we both heard somebody downstairs. Anyways, I was shocked to hear it, and I wasn't sure if I should feel better or worse about this. I decided to confront Sam about it the next day. At first, he denied it, and then he tried to play it off as a joke. We argued briefly, and then we went our separate ways. For the rest of the time that I lived there, I barely spoke to Sam at all, but also nothing else strange happened. Several years ago, when I was broke, I moved to a new city for a job. This job was not the most well-paying job, but it was decent. Because I had no money going into it though, I had to find a cheap place to live. I ended up going onto Craigslist and finding a roommate there. I know that sounds sketchy, and the truth is that it is sketchy, because the guy that I was roommates with was weird. At first, he seemed normal enough, but I never actually met him in person until I moved into the apartment. We had a 2-bedroom place, and it was right outside of the city. My roommate's name was Kevin, and he was thin, had longer hair, and was about my age. The apartment that we got was not very nice. It was located in not the best neighborhood, and the building was old and a little bit run down. We had a living room, a small kitchen, and then a hallway where Kevin's room was at one end. The bathroom was sort of across from Kevin's room, and then my bedroom was at the other end of the hallway. I knew that living with Kevin would be temporary, and as soon as I had enough money to move to a better place, I would. After meeting Kevin and moving in, he just seemed a little bit strange. He was not that friendly, and for the most part, he stayed out of my way, which was nice, and I stayed out of his. Kevin seemed to be a pretty private guy, and didn't have much interest in being friends or anything, and that was fine. One thing he did though, was he would forget to lock the main door of our apartment. There was like 5 different times where I know I locked the door and then I would see it unlocked. I tried to talk to him about it once and he kind of blew me off. This made me kind of mad, because many times I remember I would get up to use our only bathroom, which was right across from Kevin's room. So I would have to walk by his door to use the bathroom, and Kevin would be in his bedroom when I was going to use the bathroom a lot of times. When I would start to approach, I would literally hear him locking his door. It was like he was afraid that I was going to try to go into his room, so he was locking it. And I never once tried to enter his room. I never even knocked on his door. So it was annoying how he would always do that, but seemingly forget to lock the front door. In the apartment that we lived in, I would have liked to have the front door locked all the time. Luckily though, my bedroom also had a lock on it. One night I was sleeping, but woke up in the middle of the night. The first thing that I remember after waking up is that I heard somebody right outside my bedroom door. My heart started racing, and I didn't know what to do. Whoever this person was already inside the apartment, probably because Kevin left the door unlocked. I then heard this noise, like somebody was messing around with the lock on my door. Maybe they were trying to pick it. This went on for like a minute, but luckily they didn't get in. I got my phone that was next to my bed, and I called the police. Then I turned on my bedroom light. When this happened, I heard whoever it was moving away from the door and seemingly back out towards the living room. I didn't leave my room until the police arrived. By then, I hadn't heard anything in a long time. I finally left my bedroom and saw that our front door was left unlocked again. The police came in and searched the place. While this was going on, Kevin left his bedroom, apparently woken up by the commotion. He said that he didn't see or hear anything. The police didn't find anybody, and nothing was stolen or missing. I even remember when the police were there, Kevin loudly said to me, "Are you sure you weren't dreaming the whole thing?" I found this comment to be a little bit rude, because I knew that I wasn't. The police also heard him, and I didn't want them to think that I was just imagining the whole thing. The police advised us to keep our door locked, and then they left. After they left, I remember Kevin asking me why I called the cops. It was like he was annoyed that I did. I said because he left the front door unlocked and somebody broke in. Kevin claimed that he didn't leave it unlocked, and he said that our lock must be faulty, but I didn't believe him. I mean, somebody broke into our apartment and tried to get into my bedroom, and Kevin just seemed annoyed by the whole thing. He didn't even seem that concerned. After that, we both went back to our rooms, and I went back to bed. I really couldn't wait to move out of there. Soon, I would have enough money saved up to do so. Several days went by, and everything seemed to be going normal. Then, one night, I was in my bedroom again. Now, usually, I would hang out in my bedroom, and then go to the bathroom and brush my teeth. Then I would return, lock my door, and go to sleep. That was my nightly routine that I had. So on this night, I believe it was a Friday, because I didn't have work the next morning. I know that because I was staying up much later and watching YouTube videos on my phone. It was past the time that I usually went to sleep. I think it was after midnight. I was laying on my bed and my lights were out, but my door was unlocked because I hadn't brushed my teeth yet. I remember all of a sudden seeing my bedroom door start to open. My headphones were in, so I didn't hear anything, but when I saw this, I took them out and looked to the door. After it slowly opened, I saw Kevin entering. When he saw me staring right at him, he stopped, turned around, and then left. I yelled at him, asking what he wanted, but he quickly returned to his room. I thought this was really weird and also creepy. So I got up and brushed my teeth, then locked my door and went to bed. The next day, I asked Kevin what he was doing, and he completely denied it. I couldn't believe it. He suggested that I was having another dream. This made me mad, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I realized that it was probably him the night I had called the police. I don't think anybody else even entered our apartment. I mean, nothing was stolen and nothing was messed up. Plus, the person went right for my room. So I started looking for a new place that same day. Within a week, I moved out. Ever since then, I haven't seen or heard from Kevin, and I'm hoping that I never do. This is the story of my freshman year in college. I went to a smaller university. There were only a few thousand students that attended it, so the campus wasn't very large. But I liked that about this place. However, my first year, I had to live in the dorms. To save a little bit of money and maybe make a friend, I chose to have a random roommate. This decision backfired. I didn't know anybody at the college when I got there, and the first person that I met was the roommate. He told me that his name was Joe. Joe was a strange guy. Overall, he was rude, unfriendly, and he never left the room other than to go to class. He was not at all the type of person that I would normally hang out with. And by the second week, I had given up all hope of being friends with him. I had a TV and a PS4 that I brought with to school, and Joe said that I could never use it because it bothered him. He also demanded that all lights be off after dark. I tried to reason with him once, but he threatened to report me to the dean of students. I wasn't scared by the threat. I didn't really think they would do anything, but I would rather just try to get along with my roommate. Instead, I would do my studying in class buildings around campus. I made other friends at college pretty quickly, and when I was talking with them about Joe one day, they suggested that I get a new room. I hadn't even realized this was an option until they told me, so I put in a request to get my own solo dorm room. I was told that when one came available, they would contact me. About 2 weeks later, so now about a month and a half into the school year, I was contacted. I was told that I could move into a different dorm building that was across the street. This building was a little bit newer and nicer. It had a room that was available and I accepted it. I decided not to even tell Joe. I didn't know if he would be happy or sad about it, but I didn't want him thinking that I hated him or something. So one day, when Joe was gone at his classes, at a time that I didn't have class, I packed up all my stuff and just left. Without saying a word, my entire half of the room was now gone. I moved into my new building and got my new room. It was so nice to finally have a place all to myself. I could watch TV, play PlayStation, and not have any complaints. I could even have my friends over to hang out. However, I did want to be careful not to see my old roommate Joe. Like I said, it was a small campus, so there was a chance that we would cross paths. If we did, I didn't want him to ask me why I left or something. I was careful to avoid him, and I didn't see him at all for a couple of days. As for my new room, at first, it was great. But on probably the second or third night that I was there, something happened. I was playing video games late at night, and I heard somebody try to open my door. It was locked, so it didn't open. After a few seconds, I got up to look out of my peephole. When I was walking towards the door, I heard somebody knock on it. There weren't even that many people that knew I lived here yet, so I found this to be really strange. When I got to the door, I saw Joe standing there. I did not want to answer it, and I quietly moved away from the door. He knocked one more time, and I didn't answer that either. I was really creeped out. I mean, how did he even know that I lived here? I
I didn't tell him, and I wasn't friends with him on Snapchat or anything where he could see my location. This was really strange. I went back and looked like 10 minutes later, and he was finally gone. I didn't know why he had come here. There was no reason that I could think of. Well, the next morning, I got up and had to go to class. When I left my room, I walked down a couple of hallways to get to the front of the building. In one of the hallways was a sort of lounge study area. When I was approaching it, I saw Joe sitting in one of the chairs there. I couldn't believe that he was in my dorm building. He didn't live here. I didn't know what he was doing. I turned around and left out of another exit. I thought maybe he was following me. It was really strange. Later on in that same day, I was walking on campus and I happened to notice him again. There was sort of a lot of other people walking around, and I saw him a ways behind me. I walked back to my dorm building, and he seemed to almost follow me there. He wasn't walking close enough to follow me inside or anything, but I was very suspicious when I noticed. I got back in my building and was wondering what this guy's problem was. Well, that same night, he was back at my room. Once more, I was up late, and he tried entering. It was locked like always, and he then knocked on the door. This time, it was louder than before. I didn't answer, but was watching him through the peephole. He knocked again very loudly, but I still did nothing. When he knocked for a third time, I remember somebody else who lived down the hall opened up their door. They told him to quiet down. Joe didn't say anything. Then he stood there for probably a minute. After that, he backed up a step and then kicked my door extremely loud and hard. I was honestly afraid that the door might break, but it didn't. Joe then turned and stormed off. After this, I made up my mind that I was going to report him, and the next day I did. Somebody must have talked to him or something, because I stopped seeing him after that, and he did not return to my room. I was still very suspicious that he would follow me around or show up again or something for like a month, but luckily he didn't. A while after this, I met somebody that used to know him. They weren't really his friend, but had several classes with him. They told me that he had dropped out, and also said that his name wasn't even Joe. None of these things really surprised me. I'm not sure why he gave me a fake name, but he was a weird guy. Looking back, I'm really glad that I moved out when I did. Back when I got my first adult job after college, I moved into a smaller house with a roommate. The roommate was a girl that I went to high school with, and her and I were in the same grade. However, we weren't really friends. We both knew of each other, but didn't have the same friend groups. I didn't know much about her, but somehow, after college, we found ourselves living in the same city. We had been friends on Facebook or something, and because we both lived there and didn't know anybody else, we decided to try to become friends and live together. We were both female, the same age, and figured that it would work out. But I was wrong about that. At first, she seemed cool. I honestly forgot where she worked, but she had pretty normal hours like I did. Our bedrooms were the only two in the house, and next to each other in the hallway. We were not best buddies or anything, but we got along good at first. But she seemed to have sort of strange behavior. I remember that I was noticing her leaving and coming home at all kinds of odd hours. All the time, I would wake up to hearing her leaving or coming home. I was a light sleeper, and the times would be anywhere from midnight to 5 a.m. I had no idea where she would be going or why. And this happened so much, at least several times a week. One time, I brought it up, asking why she was leaving at 2 a.m. She flat out denied it and said that I must have heard the neighbor. I didn't tell her I knew it was her, because I realized that whatever it was, she didn't want me to know. I didn't really think too much of it for the most part, though. But one night, several months into living there, I was out late. I was with some other friends, and I got back home at probably almost midnight. After arriving back to the house, I went inside and all of the lights were off. I turned on some lights and also noticed that my roommate's door was open and she did not appear to be inside. I called out her name, just wondering if she was home. I figured that she was gone again when she didn't answer. Then I went into my bedroom and changed and got in bed. I was tired, but after closing my eyes, for some reason, I had a hard time getting to sleep. I laid there for probably 20 minutes trying to rest, but it was like I wasn't tired anymore. Then, suddenly, I heard this noise inside of my room. I had no idea what it was. I I looked up and saw my closet door opening. Then I saw my roommate walking out. It was really dark in there, but I could clearly tell that it was her. This was so strange. I had no idea what she was doing in there. I sat up and asked her what was going on. As soon as I spoke, she looked over and saw me. Then she started running and darted out of my room. I stayed where I was and was just so confused. Then, probably a minute later, I heard her leaving the house out the front door. At that point, I decided that I needed to move out of there as soon as possible. For the next couple of days, I packed up my stuff. I don't know where my roommate was during this time, but she was never there when I was. She must have only been back when I was at work. Then I moved out. After that, I haven't spoken to her since. She blocked me on social media, and I still don't know why she was hiding in the closet of my room. She probably didn't expect me to get home when I did. That's why her door was open and she was in my room. She must have had to hide in my closet and waited until she thought I was sleeping to try to leave the room. I'm glad that I couldn't sleep though, and that I noticed her. That was by far the creepiest roommate experience I've ever had.
Currently, I'm a senior in college at a pretty big school. I transferred over here from a smaller school 3 years ago now. I went to that school during just my freshman year, and going into my first semester there, I didn't know anybody at the school, and I was required to live in the dorms. I was assigned a random roommate during that time, and when I first moved in, immediately the guy seemed a little bit strange. His name was Brian, and he was sort of tall, skinny, had blonde hair and glasses. I remember that one of the first things he said to me when I met him was that he was crazy, and you never knew what he was going to do. Of course, people might say this in a joking way, and I laughed when he said it, and so did he. But after talking with him and getting to know him a little bit after moving in, he did seem a little bit off. After living with him the first several weeks of school, my overall impression of the guy was that he was a bit of a loose cannon. He would say things that were just weird, or make inappropriate jokes that crossed the line a little bit. He also came and went from our dorm room at the most random times. Sometimes he would be gone for the entire day from our room. Other times he would be in the room all day. I would also occasionally wake up in the middle of the night to hear him either entering or exiting the room with his backpack or jacket on. For the most part, we didn't do much together, other than when we were both in the room doing homework or whatever, and then we would talk sometimes. I remember one time, towards the end of the first semester, Brian randomly said that he'd been watching me sleep the night before. Obviously, I thought this was strange. Brian sort of laughed as he said it, so I knew he was joking, but it was just a strange thing to say. This is kind of how things were for the entire first semester. We had a couple of fun times, but I really didn't like living with him. Then the second semester came in the spring. Things started out just like they had left off from the previous semester, and Brian seemed like he always had. But one night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I typically never woke up unless there was a noise nearby of some sort. But I don't remember hearing anything. I just remember opening my eyes a little bit and seeing Brian standing at the foot of my bed, just staring at me. It was really dark in the room, but I could clearly tell that it was him. I didn't sit up or anything. I just closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. I figured he would walk away, but he didn't. I couldn't help but barely open my eyes again, and Brian was still there. He stayed there for at least 5 minutes. I really don't know what he was doing. Maybe sleepwalking? When I woke up the next morning and was able to think more clearly, I remembered about how Brian had made a comment to me earlier about him watching me sleep. I guess he hadn't been joking. But why would he do that? It was just so weird. I tried to tell myself it was just his strange sense of humor, but later on in the semester, it happened again. I woke up in the night to see Brian standing at my bed just watching me. This time, I sat up. As soon as I did, Brian backed up and ran out of the room. I yelled at Brian asking what was going on as he was running out, but he didn't stop to answer me. He didn't return to the room before I fell asleep again, and when I woke up the next morning, Brian was still gone. I didn't see him again until that night, and when he got back, I asked him why he was watching me sleep. At first, Brian denied it, which really surprised me. He had outright told me this before. He said that I must have been dreaming. I played along and said that I guessed that I was, and I laughed, just because he was starting to make me nervous. Then, maybe a week later, I was doing homework at my desk on the side of the room. We lived on the 4th floor, which was the top floor of the dorm building, and it always got really hot in the room. There was a big window at the end of the room by our desks, and we would often open it to let in some fresh air. As I was doing my homework at my desk one night, Brian randomly said to me that one day he was going to push me out of the window. He said it with a laugh, and I laughed as well, but given his previous comments, I couldn't help but not think it was so funny. In fact, it made me quite nervous. In the days that followed, I was kind of watching my back a bit more. However, not too long after this at all, everybody at our school, including me and Brian, were sent home because of COVID. This was March of 2020, and for the rest of the school year, we had our classes online. Because of this, I never did see Brian for the rest of the school year, and that next fall, I transferred to my current school. I sometimes wonder if Brian was actually going to try and push me out of the window. I don't really think I believed that he would, but he was just really strange, and I guess I never knew what to expect from him. A couple of years ago, I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment. I had a roommate, and we both had our own bedroom, and then we shared a living room, small kitchen, and a tiny bathroom. It was all I could afford at the time. My roommate was named Frank. Frank was around my age, and overall kind of a sloppy person. I didn't live there too long before finding that out. I don't want to just complain about the guy, but he left dishes all over the place, and in the sink. He never did any kind of cleaning, and overall, the guy wasn't that friendly either. If he was in the living room or kitchen, and I came out into the room, he would often just leave without saying a word. He wasn't too big on conversation. It's not like I was trying to watch movies with him or eat at the table with him, but I thought it would be nice to be able to make basic conversation, or at least get to know each other a little bit, but he always would just give basic responses, and didn't seem to be interested in being friends at all. He wasn't rude, just not friendly. After like 6 months of living there, one day I was at the apartment by myself, and the smoke detector started beeping. This meant that the battery needed to be replaced. I ignored it for a few hours, but then realized that the beeping sound was too annoying to let go. I got a chair from the kitchen and brought it into the hallway where the smoke detector was. It happened to be on the ceiling right in front of Frank's room. As I was working on changing it, I dropped the new battery and it fell onto the floor and kind of rolled into Frank's bedroom. His door was open just a crack, and I had to open it more to get the battery. When I did this, I couldn't help but look inside Frank's room. I had never seen inside before. Frank always kept his door shut, and I had never thought to look inside of it. As I picked up the battery from the floor, I glanced around. His room was sort of messy, which didn't surprise me at all. But I noticed something. I saw on the floor, sort of in the corner of the room in front of his closet, there were some sneakers that were the same kind that I had. They were one of my nicer pair, and I hadn't worn them since I had lived there. I had mostly kept them in my closet. These were also extremely clean like mine were, and I had never seen Frank wear them. That gave me a crazy thought. I ran into my room and opened up my closet. I looked inside, and sure enough, my sneakers were gone. Why did Frank have my shoes in his room? He would have had to go into my closet to get them. I went back into Frank's room and looked around again out of curiosity. I walked all the way in this time and went straight for his closet door. When I opened it, I noticed several more items that belonged to me. There was a sweatshirt, a hat, a book, and even a pair of headphones that I had. I had actually been wondering where some of these items went. Others I hadn't even noticed were gone. I kept looking and found a couple of more things. Most of the items I had barely noticed were gone. The discovery was very strange, and I took all of the stuff back, then made sure everything else in his room was back in place like it should be. Frank got home that night several hours later. When he arrived at his room, almost immediately, he came out of it and asked me if I had gone in his bedroom. I have no idea how he knew that, other than by seeing that I took my own stuff back. I told Frank the whole story. I said I dropped a battery and it rolled into his room, and as I was getting it, I noticed that he had some of my stuff. Then I asked him why he had taken my things, and amazingly, he denied it. He claimed he hadn't taken anything that belonged to me, and then stormed off into his room and slammed the door. I didn't see him for the rest of the night. The next day, I had to go to work. I didn't see Frank at all that morning, but when I got home in the afternoon, I went inside to see the entire apartment all messed up. Everything was out of place and on the floor. My bedroom was especially messed up. It was like a tornado had ran through the entire apartment. Frank's door was shut. I walked over and pounded on his door, but nobody answered it, so I opened it. When I did, Frank wasn't there, and his room was completely empty. However, his keys were not in the apartment, so he still had them wherever he was. I called a friend who lived sort of in the area, and I stayed at his place for a few nights. I no longer felt safe in that apartment. I ended up moving the next week. I'm not sure what ended up happening with Frank or the apartment. He definitely was a strange guy, and I hope I don't run into him again. This story happened just last year. After college, when I got my first apartment, I needed a roommate. I was living in a new city where I really didn't know anybody at all, and there was this guy named Alex that I went to college with there. I didn't know him that well, but I did have a class with him in college, and we knew of each other, so we decided to be roommates. The apartment had 2 bedrooms and was a good amount of space. Both of our bedrooms were next to each other in a hallway off the living room. After moving in, I got along with Alex pretty well. We didn't talk a whole lot or do stuff together because we were both really busy with work. Overall, though, we got along and were friendly with each other. But that soon changed. One night, as I was sleeping, I woke up in the middle of the night because somebody was knocking on my bedroom door. I was really confused after waking up, but once I came to my senses, I realized it must be Alex knocking on my door for some reason. I got up and turned my light on, and then went over to answer the door, but when I opened it, nobody was there. I walked out over to Alex's room. His door was closed, and his lights were off. I asked, "Alex, was that you?" He didn't answer me. It seemed like he was still asleep. I looked around the rest of the apartment, but nobody else was there, thankfully. After that, I went back to bed. The next day, I asked Alex about it. He said he had slept through the whole night and didn't hear any knocking on my door or his, and he said it definitely wasn't him knocking on my door. I had no reason not to believe him, and it creeped the both of us out. I asked him if he ever would sleepwalk, and he said no. However, this same thing happened the very next night. When I heard the knocking, I asked who was there, but nobody answered. I got up and ran to the door and opened it. Nobody was there, but I heard Alex's door closing down the hall. I also saw it out of the corner of my eye. I couldn't see clearly he was there, but I knew it had to be him, so I ran over to his door and then opened it. He was now laying in his bed, but I knew it had to be him. I stood in his doorway and asked him why he was knocking on my door. He didn't answer me. He was either pretending to be asleep or had actually been sleepwalking. The next morning, I confronted him about this. He said he had no idea what I was talking about, and that maybe he did sleepwalk after all. A few nights later, it happened again. He banged on my door louder than he had before this time. When I got up, he ran away back to his room just like he always did. This was getting really annoying, and I made the decision that I was going to move into my own place. When I told Alex this, I gave other reasons why I was moving, because I didn't want to make him feel bad or cause any problems. I told him that I was making enough money now and just wanted to have my own place. I said I had nothing against him. I truly didn't know if he was sleepwalking or just messing with me for some reason. A short time later, I ended up moving into a smaller 1-bedroom apartment on the first floor and had the whole place to myself. This apartment was a few miles away from my old one, but in the same city. It was nice to not have a roommate anymore, and I lived there for maybe a week before one night I was woken up in the middle of the night again. Once again, I heard a knocking noise, but it wasn't coming from my bedroom door. This time, it was coming from my window. I looked over to it, and I saw Alex staring in my window and knocking on it. I got up, and as soon as I did, he ran away. This completely freaked me out. I couldn't believe that he would go all the way to my new apartment, and one of the creepiest parts is that I had never told him where my new place was. I called him up the next day on the phone and told him about it, which he denied. Then I said if he ever did this again, I would call the police. After that, I haven't seen him since. When I got my first job after graduating college, I didn't have much money, and I had to go move to a new city, so I needed a roommate for a while. I was desperate, so I put an ad out that I needed a roommate, and I basically took the first guy to respond and got a place with him. His name was Michael, and when we met, he seemed like a pretty normal guy. He was roughly my age and was nice, but a bit quiet, and overall I didn't think it would be a problem living with him. The apartment that we had was on the 4th floor of a 6-story building. It had 2 bedrooms, one at each end of the hallway. It also had a bathroom, kitchen, and a living room that we shared. Over the first few weeks, I was mostly busy with work and didn't really talk to Michael much or see him. He would mostly just be in his room with the door shut, and I didn't have a problem with that. I did occasionally try to have conversations with him if I saw him out of his room, but he seemed like a pretty private guy and never really talked much about himself.
Still, this didn't really bother me much, because as long as he paid his half of the rent and didn't mess up the place, I had no reason to complain. That's why on one night, about a month into living there, I woke up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. I looked around and was really surprised to see Michael standing in the doorway of my bedroom. He seemed to be looking at me. I said, "Michael?" He stood there for at least 10 seconds just looking at me before saying that he wasn't sure if I was awake or not. He wanted to know if I had a pair of headphones that he could borrow. I told him I didn't, and then he walked away. I laid there really confused for a few minutes before finally falling back asleep. It really wasn't like him to do something like that. Overall, it was weird, but it was really nothing that strange. But just a few nights later, I woke up in the night again, but this time I saw Michael actually inside of my room. I watched him walk out of my room and back down the hall. I don't think he saw me at all, and I ended up just falling back asleep again. Then again, about a week later this time, I was not asleep yet, but I was laying in bed about to fall asleep, and I saw my door slowly start to open, and Michael just walk in without knocking or anything. He looked at me, but all my lights were out, and I don't think he could tell if I was awake or not. I asked him what he was doing in my room, and he seemed really startled to see me awake. He paused for a few seconds, and then walked to my hamper, which had a bunch of my clean clothes that I had just washed in it. He said he thought I had taken some of his socks by accident, and he couldn't find them. I really wasn't buying that excuse, but I told him to go ahead and look at my clothes. He looked around for a while and then just left. The next day, I decided to confront Michael and ask him why he kept going in my bedroom in the middle of the night. When I did, he played dumb and said that he only went in there one time. I told him I had seen him in there before, but he completely denied it. That made me start to wonder if I had made a bad decision on being so quick with my choice of roommate. I just hoped that after I talked to him, he would stop going in my room. And it seemed to work because I didn't wake up or see any evidence of him being in my room for probably about a month, which was nice. But then one night, I once again awoke, but this time saw Michael literally standing over me at the end of my bed. When I saw it, I jumped back. Michael looked very startled as well and immediately ran out of my room. This was the last straw for me, and I decided that the next day I was going to look into moving out of that apartment and getting locks for my door in the meantime. But the next morning when I woke up, Michael was gone and all of his things were gone from his room. I had never really been in his room before, but his door was wide open and there was nothing in it at all. The only contact I had for Michael was a phone number. I called him and then texted him, but I never got an answer. I looked him up online but couldn't find him anywhere on social media. He kept paying his rent every month the same as always until our lease ended. I never did end up seeing him again. This is the story of my first roommate in college. I was a freshman at a decent-sized university in Ohio. I got a random roommate for my first semester in the dorms. He immediately seemed a little odd to me, just kind of the way he talked and acted in general. Nothing that crazy, but he just stuck out to me as a little strange. Still, I tried to make the most of it, and would talk to him here and there. I was able to make friends rather quickly at school, and within about a month, I sort of had a group of guys that I would hang out with regularly. My roommate, on the other hand, never really seemed to leave the room, other than to go to class. I would sometimes offer him to hang out with the guys, but he would always turn it down. Whenever I would leave the dorm, though, he would always ask me where I was going and how long I was going to be gone for. I found that sort of annoying because it's not like he was my older brother or something, but if I was going to be out late, I always made sure to tell him. One day, when I happened to be at the dorm and my roommate was away at class, I was drinking a bottle of water, and when I was done with it, I threw it across the length of the room to try to make it in my garbage can. I missed, though, and it bounced away to my roommate's side of the room and kind of went under his bed. I went to go grab it, and as I was picking it up, something caught my eye. It was a storage box that was slightly open and underneath another box, but I could see some photos in it. I admit that my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to open the box. I had to move the box on top of it to get to it, but I opened it very carefully. I thought initially that it was maybe family photos of my roommate, but when I started looking through them, I became really weirded out. There was many photos of random students walking around on campus. All of the photos were candid, and many looked like they had been taken from our dorm room, which had a nice view of the campus. There were probably over 100 photos, and some had multiple of the same person. They all appeared to be taken at a far distance, and the camera was zoomed in. Then I found a photo of myself when I was walking to class one day. I decided to put all the photos back as I had found them. I closed the box and got back to my side of the room. My roommate came home later that day and went on his computer. After several minutes, he asked me if I had been going through his stuff. I admitted that my bottle had rolled under his bed, and I moved his box a little, but I didn't tell him about seeing his box of photos. He said okay, but seemed to be a little upset. That night, I decided to hang out with my friends like I often did, and told my roommate that I'd be back by 11. It happened to be a Friday night, and my friends and I stayed out a little bit late, and I lost track of time a little. I went to one of my friends' houses after, and saw that I had a text from my roommate asking me why I wasn't back yet. It was 11:10. I texted my roommate saying I was on my way back, and he replied that he had a surprise for me. My roommate was not normally one to make jokes, and something about that text just rubbed me the wrong way. I went back to the dorm, and when I did, I got to my room and opened it to see my roommate immediately come charging at me. I closed the door quickly and ran out. He didn't chase me and stayed in the room. I was legitimately worried, so I decided to call the campus safety, and they showed up a few minutes later. I went away from the room and went back to my friend's house. I was later told that my roommate was found hiding behind the door and tried to attack the campus safety officer. Police were brought in, and he was arrested. I got to live in the dorm by myself for the rest of the year. This story took place when I was in college. I went to a school in a different state from where I lived, but through a website, I was able to find a roommate beforehand that would be a good match for me. Her name was Annie, and she happened to have the same major as me. We were both females who loved animals, and we even talked about trying to maybe sneak a cat into our dorm. We got along great online, but when we first moved in together, she seemed a bit different. She just wasn't quite as nice, but overall that wasn't a huge deal. Over time, things got a little bit better though, and I enjoyed having her as a roommate. One night on a weekend, about a month into the school year, Annie told me she was invited to a party and wanted me to come with. Of course I told her I would, and that night we went together. We walked because it was only about 6 blocks away, but when we got to the house, it didn't seem like a party was going on. I guess that was a good thing, because then the cops wouldn't get called. But when Annie opened the door and went inside with me, there really was nothing going on. It was a typical old house that looked kind of run down inside. I asked Annie where everyone was. She told me the party was in the basement and said for me to go ahead, but she had to call her mom real quick. I walked down into the basement, where there were stairs that went down rather steep and then went around in another direction. I could hear music playing, but when I went around the corner, I saw just a mostly dark basement with a man in it about 10 feet away. I immediately turned back and ran up the stairs. The man started to chase after me. When I got up to the top of the stairs, the door was closed. I opened it and shut it behind me, then ran out of the house. Annie ran with me when she saw me running away. We both ran all the way back to the dorm. I explained to her what happened, and then she explained to me that she had the wrong address. I wanted to call the police, but we realized that we couldn't because we were in the wrong house, and technically somebody chasing someone out of their own house isn't really a crime. But as time went by, I started to realize how things just didn't add up. I began to suspect Annie had set me up. 2 days after the incident, though, Annie told me she was moving away to a new room because she just needed to be by herself. She packed up all her stuff and then left. I never did see her on campus again. To this day, I think that she set me up. The way the door was closed when I ran back up the stairs, and how she had told me to go into the basement, and then how she changed rooms right after. I could be wrong, but I have my suspicions.